Gold, copper, Bitcoin, Midas Gold, Rudy's face melting, Mexican generals getting drug trafficking charges dismissed by AG Barr, all sorts of things going on. Truly a bizarro world. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is the Thanksgiving edition of Bizarro World. Nick, episode 95. How are you, sir?
Gobble, gobble, Gerardo. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm doing good. How's it going?
I am well. I am thankful. Our digest publishing venture is off to a ripping and roaring start and just, picking up more momentum. I am excited about that. I am excited about copper hitting a 2-year high. Let's get right into it. Let's talk gold. Gold pulled back a bit and we've said for years that it was going to have to rise alongside the U.S. indices, Bitcoin, and eventually a higher U.S. dollar. And, really, we haven't had a higher U.S. dollar. What we have had is Bitcoin just moving, right? A lot of speculative capital obviously is going over to that sector. Do you think that's affected the gold price? You would expect that with the dollar being as weak as it has been, that gold would be a tad bit higher, though. Again, not complaining. 1873. We have lots of companies that are going to do very well if gold never goes up another $1.
I mean, if I'm talking, it's not because I have an answer right now. It's just because I'm talking through it and kicking ideas around. I think I sent you and a colleague yesterday an email that said something to the effect of no one knows what the fuck's going on right now. Because like you say, the dollar hasn't gone back up to like that 94 level. It's sort of stayed between 92 and 93. Now, I guess it's relatively strong, right? And the other thing that's happened is rates have been rising very fast. If you look at the U.S. 10-year, which I was writing about this week. And so, it's interesting how the correlations go. I guess correlations is what I would talk about. Something I was thinking about yesterday. It's like, for a while we were talking about that dollar gold correlation. And then all of a sudden it's like seemingly out of nowhere, these rates start to rise and are up very fast. And then it's the rates that matter more than the dollar itself. And so that's what I mean by sort of no one knows what's going on. It's and we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, certainly since the volatility before the election and then headed into the election and the uncertainty that followed it. Is the market is trying to figure out what's going on, right? We've still got a president who has said he won the election, who hasn't formally conceded. We don't know how big the stimulus is going to be. We've got a balance sheet in Europe, central bank that's growing very fast. And so there's just a lot of things at play, and it's also holiday season. I mean, I could just keep going, right? It's Thanksgiving in the U.S., and then it's going to be Christmas Hanukkah worldwide, right? And so people are just, I think, tired of 2020, want to get through this holiday season, and then want to get back to it. And I think 2020 is going to be good. I think that the correction in gold was healthy. I think that even if it tests that next lower bound of support at the 1800 level, that's still a very strong gold price where deals can get done and where companies generate cash. And to Bitcoin, I'm not sure that Bitcoin is, back to 2 Thanksgivings ago when everybody was talking about Bitcoin, when we actually could have big gatherings for holidays and things like that pre-pandemic. And it's sort of disconnected a bit from the dollar and gold, as you say. It's and here come, and you were writing about this, Jardo, so you can talk about it. Here come the $100,000 forecasts again, right?
The experts are back. They're back.
Yeah, this is going to unseat institutions, and this is the path to true financial freedom. And I agree with some of that, but I think gold still has a firm place, and I don't think a gold correction means the end of a gold bull market by any means.
I agree with all of that. We are starting to get drill results from companies that we have been expecting results from. Still nothing from New Placer Dome Gold or Nevada Sunrise as it relates to Kinsley Mountain, of course, property that has over 50 holes, or at least 50 holes drilled into it now. But we did receive news again from Chakana. I mean, they had some absolutely spectacular results And the group that's out there program shorting at 500 shares at a time has done a remarkably effective job of suppressing the price. And so I say that to give people their money's worth on this podcast. That's your free advice for the week. Chicana Copper is finding, they intersected 10.7 meters of 24.99 grams per ton gold equivalent. And let me break that down for you people if you don't like the gold equivalent line there. It's 10.7 meters of 7.25 grams per ton gold, 10.2% copper, and 163.5 grams per ton silver from 32.4 meters. So it's high grade and it's shallow. And despite that, the stock's down for the week. So it's an opportunity. I can tell you, I own hundreds of thousands of shares now. I've doubled my position in the past week and a half, my personal position. And so it's these prices aren't sustainable, especially in the context of copper hitting a 2-year high, currently trading at $3.28 a pound. Supply disruptions are starting to hit. I think the expectation of more stimulus eventually, right? Whether it's in February here in the US or beforehand, we know that Europe, of course, is now talking about the biggest bazooka. And, it's funny. This is the language that the ECB has used for the past several years. We potentially have a big bazooka, and then it was a bigger bazooka. And now the language is the biggest bazooka. And so December should be an interesting month, to say the least, in the currency markets. And I think, that has the potential for some real consequential implications in the gold space. And we'll see. We'll see if the U.S. follows. We talked about this a bit last week. So anyhow, drill results are starting to come in. Thoughts on Chicana Copper and the program short out there?
Gosh, that's a heck of a hole, that intercept you just went through there. High grade copper and gold from very shallow depths. And so I think you just got to click on the press release and take a look at a couple of maps. One is the map of the breccia pipes that they're drilling and are about to drill. They're also highly prospective. There's 7 holes, I believe it is, into Juan Carama that aren't out yet. And that's also highly prospective, as is Paloma West. And you'll be able to see that how these breccia pipes dot the landscape on the press release, on the image in the press release. And beneath that, there's an image, an actual aerial image, a drone image of one of the breccia pipes. And you can sort of see the scale as it's sort of etched into the side of the mountain. And there's just worth reiterating that there's a couple of dozen of those pipes, I believe it is, and they haven't clearly all been drill tested, and there's a lot of meters yet to drill. And those results are, I guess I can start to say this at this point, Gerardo, I've seen a lot of results. I guess at this point, those are some of the better results I've seen as far as exploration drilling is concerned. And so I was in the market buying Chicana as well. And, you and I are on the same wavelength. One of the things that crossed this mind this morning was, where the fuck are those Kinsley results? So, they're taking their time. They are taking their time.
Yeah, we're just going to have to wait. I guess it is what it is, right? Well, I have opinions, but I'll keep them to myself for the time being. Let's talk Mawson Gold, which, again, if you like gold and you like high grade and you like multiple stable jurisdictions, I think Mawson Gold presents a very, very, very interesting opportunity right now. They just made a new discovery in Finland. They have a new discovery, actually multiple discoveries in Australia. It would not surprise me if Michael Hudson decided to spin out the Australian assets come 2021, as I don't believe the market is giving the company any kind of credit for, the bottom line is they've hit high grade in the first 3 holes that they've drilled over there, over 2 projects, 3 holes into each one of those 2 projects. And so multiple rigs turning in multiple jurisdictions, cashed up, aggressively exploring, anchored by a robust resource and cobalt credits in Finland, as well as gold. A lot to like. So Mawson Gold is one that I encourage everybody to do some due diligence on.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Some of the standalone companies that are in the Victorian goldfields, and we've seen a couple of those deals in the past couple of weeks. Those comparables are getting, valuations that are equal to, what Mawson's getting. And that's not even, Mawson's got a flagship asset in Finland. So, I hadn't thought about spinning out the Australian assets, but that's actually a good idea.
I've been strongly advocating for that since the beginning, behind the scenes to Mr. Hudson. And, it's something that the company has publicly said. I think the official line was they're willing to consider all options to maximize shareholder value is what was said. And so, no, I think a spin out makes perfect sense in light of the fact that, they're clearly on, to a new discovery out there. And it's the first time that ground has been tested by modern exploration methods in over a century. So exciting stuff out of Australia and out of Midas Gold. We got to talk vaccines again. It seems like, last week we talked about the one that is said to be 90% effective. We now have a second vaccine that is said to be up to 95% effective. This a Moderna vaccine. And so, it comes at a time, frankly, where, again, whether you agree or disagree with the lockdowns and the approach and, the scattered approach of opening, closing, and, seemingly no coherent policy, cases are on the rise. That's a very real thing. Hospitalizations are on the rise. It isn't just because they're testing more. No, more people are getting sick. And so how are things in Washington State, Nick? I know that you and I spoke here recently where they shut down the school briefly, and I believe it was reopened. Is that correct?
Yeah, school reopened. They were in for the past week. Starting, well, you'll listen to this podcast on a Monday. So let me look at a calendar because I rarely know what day it is anyway. Starting this week, which was, I guess, the night of the 17th. So Tuesday the 17th headed into Wednesday the 18th of November. Overnight, the new restrictions went into force, which is basically back into lockdown. I don't know all the restrictions off the top of my head, but it's certainly no indoor gyms, no indoor salons, no indoor dining. And so those are three big things, right? Back into lockdown, essentially. And yeah, cases are at daily records. Hospitalizations are back on the uptick in the market. And frankly, everyone, I think, is ready for this vaccine, right? People are ready to put this behind us. It's time to have a birthday party for COVID, essentially. It's 1 year anniversary of entering the country is here in the next couple of weeks, right? And so
haven't had a proper lap dance in 8 months.
That's funny. At least not without a Lysol wipe. And so, and the market likes this juice, right? I mean, the 90% efficacy juice the market from Pfizer a couple of weeks ago. And then here comes Moderna with 95%. And I think I saw somebody saying on Twitter, can I get 96? Can I get 97? And then it just keeps juicing the market higher. And we can go back to talking about the market. I know stocks are down in the past couple of days, but they're still at record highs and went higher on the back of this vaccine. And so, yeah, it's going to be a cold winter, and we're still going to have to deal with the effects of this vaccine insofar as it relates to, the lost jobs as a result of the shutdowns and the closure of businesses as a result of that. And so I think the economy still has a lot of reckoning to do, but I also think that it's trying to price in at least a short-term recovery from this vaccine. And so I hope this vaccine happens sooner than later.
I agree. Let's talk the most interesting news release, at least to my eye. And that's one, and of course, you all will listen to this on Monday, but today is Friday when we're recording this. And there was news this morning that Midas Gold published, and the headline reads, Paulson and Company sends letter to Midas Gold employees. Now, for those of you not familiar, John Paulson of Big Short fame is a 44.1% owner of outstanding shares of Midas Gold, him and his group. And so the very short version is the group sent off a letter to Midas Gold employees, and I'll read a small part of it. It says, given the many milestones we have hit this year, all due to the extraordinary effort you have put in on the ground in Idaho, we believe now is the appropriate time to start planning the next phase of the company as it evolves from seeking permits to eventually taking the Stibnite Gold project into production. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The letter goes on to say, we believe that it is time for Midas to re-domicile from Canada to the U.S. And then it says, secondly, we believe we must continue to position ourselves as a critical minerals company and not just as a gold producer, which I agree with. And it's something that publicly you and I, along with Stephen Quinn, CEO, have said for years. Third, and this was the most interesting part of the letter, it says, for us to credibly achieve these goals, we think it is imperative that the board show leadership at the top by refreshing itself with more U.S. and specifically Idaho-based directors, and by adding people with skills that better align with the future direction of the company. The market clearly, the stock is up 14% on good volume, clearly liked the support on behalf of the Paulson Group. I think that a lot of the market was waiting for a sign that he would continue to be involved past a permitting decision. And I think this is a green light for that. I think it clearly shows a desire for the Paulson Group to develop this project. And we know it has, the firepower, the capital, and the network to put together a financing package that could get this built, which bodes well in the event of a takeout offer by a company like, say, Barrick, which would be a very good fit. So the company liked that aspect of it. The request for the leadership at the top to refresh itself was very interesting. I'd love to hear your take on that. I've never been asked to refresh myself.
I think it was, so the way that noun was used, it was speaking of the board as an entity and not as an individual. And so maybe the board didn't collectively, it seems like they were asked privately to refresh themselves collectively as an entity, and that didn't happen. And now they're being let's use the term guided to do so in public by the firm that owns, like you say, 44% of the shares. And so I'd be interested to hear management's take on that, and I'm sure we'll get to in due course. But you haven't mentioned Detour Gold yet, and Paulson did a good job with that, ultimately getting it taken out by Kirkland Lake, right? And so this isn't the first go round for a board refresh, as it's being called. And look, it's and Stephen will say this, it's Paulson's deal on a outstanding and a fully diluted basis, right? And so he's already got Marcelo Kim as chairman of the board, who is from Paulson and Co. And so I welcome this, and for the reasons that you outlined. I think that we're heading into a positive record of decision in early 2021. And then it's a very large project. It requires significant amount of CapEx. And in order for the next, let's call it 12 or 18 months to go as well as possible for shareholders, you need someone with significant skin in the game to be leading the way, let's call it, as far as the capital markets piece of it is concerned. And as you also pointed out, if you can have someone doing that who is a 44% shareholder and who also can come up with some sort of financing package that isn't going to be reliant on or let's say isn't going to affect some sort of buyout offer, right? Because the financing is a weakness, then I think that's beneficial for shareholders. And so, look, I'm ready to get this permit, and it's been 7 years, I think, I've been involved with this company. And so if it could do what Detour did, then I'm all for it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can we pivot really briefly? And it's not going to be brief, so I take that back and put our tinfoil hats on and talk, conspiracy theories a bit and things that are interesting to me. Would you allow for that, Mr. Hodge?
Sure.
So, did you see the press conference this week? And I know you did with Mr. Rudy Giuliani, where his face and his head was melting off.
Yeah.
So it's clear that the administration doesn't plan on conceding. It's getting more deranged by the day, even by some people on the right, right? We expect the left to say what the left says. But even some people on the right, even Mitt Romney has now come out and said, you, Mr. President, are threatening our democracy and the institution and the tradition by refusing to concede. So a couple of directions that I want to take this. The first, as it relates to Joe Biden and Mr. Trudeau and everybody in Europe and everywhere else around the world, apparently, there's this great conspiracy theory out there that COVID is just a way for governments around the world to take control of a number of things, which is what government always tries to do, right? It tries to consolidate power. I don't believe that politicians are that smart to coordinate, a global takeover of what the future may look like politically. However, I must say, it is really strange to me to hear everybody have the same talking point of the Great Reset. And, I started hearing this weeks and months ago, 4.5 weeks ago. And I thought, okay, well, somebody said it. And then somebody in another country said it. And now I'm hearing this as if this is just the gospel, right? So do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, do you can both things be true? Can it be true that, governments around the world are using the pandemic for their own, power grab and the response for its own power grab and kind of the way that 9/11 was used to kind of strip us US citizens of so much of our privacy and our individual rights and freedoms, right? I mean, it was true that 9/11 happened. It was also true that it was used for political purposes to kick shit up, wars all over the place and to take a ton of rights from us. But do you believe there is a coordinated effort for this Great Reset?
Well, you never let a good crisis go to waste if you're in the government, right? And so I'm not sure I understand the question entirely, but this Great Reset, and I'm going to talk about it in the context of Justin Trudeau, because that's where I saw it this week was, he's talking about the coronavirus as the opportunity for a great, what'd you say, a great reset, but it's just a fourth turning, Gerardo. And so, and we've been talking about this for 6 months. The coronavirus has ushered in and expedited, I've written that probably 10 times, some things that needed to happen from, companies going bankrupt that were on the precipice to the pricking of an equity bubble that we were in, although we've now recovered to those highs and beyond, to fomenting. Let's not forget about the protests we had over the summer, right, with the response to police killings. And then, the results of this election itself as a referendum on Trump's response to the COVID pandemic. And so all the way to, I don't have to recite them all, the way we're now working at home, for example, just the changes that the virus has set into motion. I think you can categorize them as a great reset. I don't necessarily know that it's government led or it's conspiratorial. I just think that given the generational turning that's at hand and some of the events that were already in motion as it relates to debt and central banking and oligopoly and corporations not paying taxes, all the way to the stripping of your rights, which you mentioned. It was time for the needle to start going the other way. And so, is it a great reset? It's going to be over the next 5 to 10 years. And did the coronavirus have a big hand in furthering that along? Absolutely. Are the governments going to try to use it to their advantage? They always do. Is it a conspiracy? I don't think so.
Let me give you the Martin Armstrong take, right? Because I think he has been one of the more vocal people out there about this conspiracy, and he does actually, whether you believe him or not, he does a good job of laying out his case in very specific ways that may make the question a little bit more nuanced, right? He says, the Great Reset will achieve equality by reducing the wealth and employment of the middle class, while the super rich will become the overlords of this new normal. They are deliberately destroying the economy to create economic chaos, for they believe they can rebuild it green and end the disparity of income, which is communism 3.0. He goes on to say that there is a great risk that they will seize all assets and you will own nothing, precisely as the World Economic Forum has been advocating. And then he goes out to say they've used this fake pandemic to terrorize people in order to collapse the economy. And he goes on, and I'll put a link up to it. And so again, whether you agree or disagree, Martin Armstrong is an incredibly educated man, a very well-connected man. That sounds pretty out there. Until again, I start paying attention a little bit more, and I'm not giving this credibility. I'm just saying it is interesting to me that everybody has the same language around, this pandemic and our response to it, and that everybody, including the Biden administration now, is starting to adopt that language. It'll be interesting to watch here over the next several months. So that's tinfoil hat issue number one. The second one is Trump isn't going to concede, and the reasons why are always interesting to me. The conspiracy theories around that. Did you see the Edward Norton, who is just a great actor? Did you see the thread, his tweets today on his theory on why President Trump is taking this approach, which, by the way, he's 1 in 29 in court so far. And again, the press conference this week with Mr. Giuliani was, come on, for an administration, it was nothing short of embarrassing. Me as an American citizen, right? It was a bit sad to see that the leader of the free world's personal attorney is up there just literally melting away and sounding crazy, right? But did you see the Edward Norton thread?
I just pulled it up. I haven't. So go on, explain it. Let me hear what he said.
All right, I'm going to go through it, and it was so well laid out that I said, well, let me read the whole thing. Let me do it. I'm going to take 3 or 4 minutes of your time. So for those of you that don't want to listen to this, go ahead and skip 3 or 4 minutes and save yourself the trouble. So Edward Norton starts by saying, I'm no political pundit, but I grew up with a dad who was a federal prosecutor, and he taught me a lot. I've also sat a fair amount of poker with serious players, and I'll say this. I do not think Trump is trying to make his base happy or laying the groundwork for his own network. He goes on to say, or that chaos is what he loves. The core of it is that he knows he's in deep, multidimensional legal jeopardy, and this defines his every action. We're seeing a tactical delay of the transition to buy time for cover-up and evidence suppression. Above all, a desperate endgame, which is to create enough chaos and anxiety about peaceful transfer of power and fear of irreparable damage to the system that he can cut a Nixon-style deal in exchange for finally conceding. But he doesn't have the cards. His bluff after the flop has been called in court. His turn card bluff will be an escalation, and his river card bluff could be really ugly. But they have to be called. We cannot let this mobster bully the USA into a deal to save his ass by threatening our democracy. That is his play. But he's got junk in his hand, so call him. And then this is where it gets, funny. I will allow that he's also a whiny, sulky, petulant, grinchy, vindictive little 10-ply super soft bitch who no doubt is just throwing a wicked pout fest and trying to give a tiny hand middle finger to the whole country for pure spite without a single thought for the dead and dying. But his contemptible, treasonous, seditious assault on the stability of our political compact isn't about 2024, personal enrichment, or anything else other than trying to use chaos and threat to the foundation of the system as leverage to trade for a safe exit. Call his bluff. Faith in the strength of our sacred institutions and founding principles is severely stretched, but they will hold. They will. He's leaving gracelessly and in infamy. But if we trade for it, would give him some brokered settlement, we'll be vulnerable to his return. We can't flinch. I thought that was an interesting take, and it made sense the more I read it.
It's all smoke and mirrors and cheap hair dye.
Speaking of smoke and mirrors, did you see General Cienfuegos? I talked about this a month and a half ago on the podcast. I've been tweeting about it because this Mexican general was arrested. He was a former defense minister from Mexico, who was arrested on drug trafficking charges last month here in the U.S. And when it happened, I tweeted, well, that's really interesting. Mexican general is comfortable enough not to worry about being indicted and sent to the U.S. He's comfortable leaving Mexico and coming and living in America. That to me was clear as all day. That's because the war on drugs is a myth, right? I know, and I've talked about this on this podcast, in Mexico, you know who to talk to about certain things. You know which police departments, which generals, which police chiefs are on the take, and you know which ones work for which groups. This isn't a secret. This isn't anything that, I'm not spilling the beans on some, crazy, quietly kept secret about corruption in Mexico. This is the way that it works. And, another secret is that the DEA has been in Mexico for years on end, helping with this fake war on drugs, making sure it's their bad guys that get power when it's convenient for them. So when this general was arrested over a month ago, I said, this isn't going to hold. Much like when they went and tried to and arrest El Chapo's kid a couple of years ago. I said, well, I was headed to a movie, and I told my wife, by the time this movie's done, he'll be free. And sure enough, we got out of the movie and he was free, right? It's just knowing how it works. But the guy was arrested, and sure enough, his attorney said, well, look, okay, I'm arrested. I'll have my day in court. I am more than happy to start naming names and letting everyone know how these charges came to be. And how those charges came to be is with the U.S. Now, here's my speculation. The U.S. greenlit a certain cartel to have security clearances from the top defense ministers in the country to allow them to run as much drugs as they wanted to run to the U.S. Now, you could just look at that and on the surface say, well, who cares? It's Mexico. It's drug dealers. But the bottom line is every day on both sides of the border, people are dying from shootouts. People are dying from heroin. People are dying, from overdoses. Very serious consequential results that is being allowed and facilitated by both Mexican and American governments. General Barr, the attorney general of this country, stepped in and said, cooperation with the Mexican government is essential for upholding our national security, and those bilateral ties must be built on common respect for our own rule of law and due process. And he intervened and got all charges dropped. How embarrassing for us as Americans. I'm going to talk as an American right now. Everybody knows I'm of Mexican ethnicity. I'm an American citizen. I have dual citizenship. As an American, how embarrassing is it for our country to be this just uncoordinated, to go pick this guy up and then have to have the attorney general come in and say that he dropped the charges because of sensitive and important foreign policy considerations? 30 years, 40 years of a failed war on drugs, cops kicking people's doors down, girlfriends sent to prison for years on end because a boyfriend gave them a bag to go hop on a bus and go sell somewhere else or transport. All the guns that have flooded Mexico, where, I've had, friends and acquaintances killed in the stuff that's going on down there. And this is what it comes to. The U.S. makes an arrest, and the Attorney General of America steps in and says, no. That corruption is okay. We greenlit that, but we can't tell anybody. Drop the charges. And they did. And he's free and he's good to go now.
Yeah. Meanwhile, South Dakota is legalizing, recreational marijuana, right? And so, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it?
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Did you read on I'm the bearer of fun news today? Pope John Paul and the saint that wasn't very saintly.
I did, and I'd be happy to discuss it if you'd like.
I would love to discuss it. It turns out that Saint Paul, Saint John Paul here, was covering up for child rapist, shuffling them around.
Surprise!
Of course, that I would love your take on this if you want to provide some more context.
I mean, we knew for a while about this McCarrick character, right? And so it's no secret what's been going on in the Catholic Church for decades. They've won they've made Oscar-winning films about it, right? And so no shit, the gentleman who was in charge of the entire organization for a large swath of that going down. You remember how long that guy was, let's call it, in power, right? I mean, my grandfather had a picture of John Paul II in his office when I was little, and he was Pope for a long time until Benedict. Certainly, when I was young, he was the Pope. So he had a long run there and presided over the church, and therefore presided over the church's sexual abuse scandal for a long time. And what happened is they ended up immediately making him a saint, or at least in church terms, it's like geologic time, right? At least in church terms, they made him a saint quite fast. And I get to use my Italian here because in the New York Times article, they were talking about how when Pope John Paul died, there was Italians flooding St. Peter's Square chanting "Santo subito," right? Saint immediately, they were saying. And now it turns out, just flash forward, everything that we know is true because we're not fucking idiots. And the guy knew about McCarrick. John Paul knew about McCarrick, and he was leading bureaucracy that was shuffling them around and covering it up, which of course they were doing, right? And so now you have a group formally calling for his sainthood to be revoked, right? And it's just. For me, it's of course, but it's good to see it, I guess, at least make the formal global diaspora, right? And now it's some action is actually being taken because they're saying the abuse victims, deserve to have this guy not be a saint, right? Deserve not to have the church celebrate this guy. And so anyway, it's just all interesting to me, the religious aspect of it. And if you want a little personal note, I mean, I probably talked about on this podcast before. I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy till I was 16 years old. Nothing nefarious ever happened to me as far as, sexual things were concerned. None of that was going down in the parish that I was involved at. But once you, start to gain education and learn things and learn about other religions and philosophies, and you start to see the hypocrisy of it all, right? And so, and then I guess the other thing that I struggle with is, I'm sending my kids to Catholic school, right? And so you almost feel a little hypocritical in that respect. But I think you really have to separate the religious component of it from the educational, Franciscan tradition of education component of it. And, you can be involved in the education without having to go through the sacraments and be involved in the parish. And we were careful to select a Catholic school that didn't make the sacraments a part of the educational curriculum. If you want to do the sacraments, you have to put in extra time to do that on the side at the school we're at. So anyway, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there. But the Catholic Church is an interesting institution, let's say, and is definitely hypocritical as it comes to the Christ-like component of it, let's say.
You see, the Boy Scouts have until the summer, next summer, to settle 95,000 sex abuse claims against the Boy Scouts of America, or in its ongoing bankruptcy case, or it won't have any cash to continue operating as an entity. You mentioned institutions, and 95,000, and these are just the people that filed, right? We know that. A lot of people just aren't comfortable, publicly admitting to being assaulted or molested or raped or whatever the case may be. That's a lot of claims, man. That's a lot of claims.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Boy Scouts. I was never a Boy Scout. The only thing I guess I could add there is I know a couple of guys who are involved at like the at least like the state board level for Boy Scouts, and it's like and they're good guys, right? They're not on the underside of this Boy Scout coin. They're now trying to clean up this mess and get this lawsuit behind them. And just the one conversation I had with them about it was it's just a logistical nightmare, right? Because some of these cases are from decades and decades, just like the church, right? Decades and decades ago. And like you were saying, it's about who's come forward and this and that. And they're really trying to, as you could imagine, move forward from this scandal because, enrollment is down, et cetera. And so, dark shadow when you allow that stuff and when you look the other way. And so, in the context of a reset, right? And I think you have to talk about, no tolerance for that stuff going forward, right? Whether in a religious institution like Catholicism or in a quasi non-denominational institution like Boy Scouts.
How complicit are we? And I'm just talking you and I right now, Nick, as American citizens right now. I'm going to pivot and go back to politics. In allowing the Trump administration the ability to make a mockery of an election, because I was all ears for evidence of fraud. I wanted to see, like I said, if you don't want every vote to count, every legally casted vote to count, I think you're an asshole, right? This is America. It's an attempt at democracy. We're a republic, but it's an attempt that's provided exceptional opportunities for myself and my family and a lot of people, right? And so how complicit are we? Are we too complacent, maybe is a better word, in just watching this from a distance? And, I joked and laughed at Rudy's face melting on his press conference, but when I see the self-styled militiamen, as Vice described them, who had the plan to kidnap the governor of Michigan, and they had a plan B and plan C if it didn't work out, where 200 combatants would seize control of the Capitol. And then, a part of the plan was to burn down the state house and or kidnap targets and execute them live on TV. I'm not making this up. I'll put the link up. This was a real plot that luckily the FBI intercepted and prevented. Are we as American citizens too complacent about the way that the election results and this transition of power is playing out, or the lack of transition of power, I should say? Do you think we'll look back in 10, 15 years and go, holy shit, what were we doing just sitting on the couch watching this and laughing at Rudy Giuliani?
I'm honestly not sure. Hindsight is 2020. It's interesting how wrapped up people got in the election itself. I was talking about basically reducing it to a sports team on both sides. Wearing the outfit and the colors of your tribe to the voting poll, and so I'm not sure if I'm going to give you an answer here, but there's a couple of sides of it. So Edward Norton says that it's a bluff, call it. He's got, he's holding no cards, right? You got to just hold his feet to the fire. And then you've got like the GOP still tweeting that, they're going to win this election and, they're backing their president or whatever, right? And so, I get a lot of emails. I own firearms, Gerardo. And so I'm on distribution lists for weapons sales websites and ammunition sales websites. And as they would, and as they've done in past elections, they are really, using this to sell guns and ammo in the context of, I'll just come out and say it. Essentially, it's a Civil War type thing where you're gonna back this president and you're gonna take the election back in the name of Trump and Republicans. And there's a faction, as you pointed to, the self-styled militiamen, right, who are taking it further than others, and that's scary in one respect. On the other side, I mean, what do you do? Do you grab an assault rifle and head across state lines? We've seen how that turns out in some cases, and I would also say that we haven't done nothing. I voted. That's doing something, and I participated directly and indirectly in some public demonstrations over this past summer heading into the election, and would do so again if it came to it. And so I think Americans are complacent as a bunch, and I think that they'll become less so as the things that are going on start to affect them more and more directly as it relates to their employment and their bottom line. And I probably didn't give you a great answer or a non-answer there, but we'll see.
Let's talk about some of the positive things we can do. We have, lines in Dallas, Texas and Houston, Texas, car lines that stretch for miles on end of people that have to use food banks as not even as an alternate, but sometimes the primary source of food due to the pandemic and the response and the state of the world right now. Again, it's Thanksgiving week. I hope everyone stays safe. I hope everyone has, a wonderful time with loved ones. But for those of us that are able to contribute and just be good citizens and good humans, I encourage everybody to use, Thanksgiving as an opportunity to donate to your local food bank. We sit here and we laugh at Rudy Giuliani and, we opine on things we're not experts on and on other things where we're pretty knowledgeable. But the common denominator for everybody, regardless, Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, white, black, rich, whatever, if you can give right now, give. If you can tip, 40, 50% instead of the usual 20, 25, do so. People are hurting out there this Thanksgiving. And so just a reminder that as bizarro as the world is right now, there are some real positive things that I think we can all do to help our neighbors, to help our community, to help our cities be a more sustainable place and more bearable given how tough things are out there. And maybe we'll put a link up or two, Nick, of organizations that you and I have donated to in the past that could definitely use it right now, right?
Good stuff, Gerardo. Well said. I can't really make that any better, so I won't try.
Do you want to talk about the Coke tax before we go?
Sure. It's not a feel-good story, but the category there is feel-good, positive / informative, and it's more informative than anything. One of the themes or one of the ideas I've talked about a lot is this oligopoly thing, right? Where corporations because they're people and because they can afford to lobby on their behalf and stack state and federal legislatures with people who are maybe not necessarily under their control, but that they help fund their campaigns, and so they help author the bills anyway. I think that too, just like the end of the sexual predation in Boy Scouts and how it's being brought to the fore in Catholicism, I think this oligopoly corporatism era comes to an end in this turning as well. And you see that more and more. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about big tech was on Capitol Hill testifying, right? And this week it was Coca-Cola who lost a court battle. And let me see if I can find the article so I get the details exactly right. But essentially they, how Coke works, they license their brand to Coke companies domiciled in other countries like Coke of Brazil and Coke of Ireland or whatever it is. Well, they were shuffling around profits this way. So they had to pay less U.S. tax on them, essentially, is the nutshell version of the story. And the IRS was like, well, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And so it went to court, and Coca-Cola lost and ends up being on the hook for the bulk of a $3.4 billion tax bill. And I just thought it was worth bringing up as an informative story because I think that this is only the beginning of that. And when we talk about states being broke and states like South Dakota legalizing marijuana, I think this end of corporatism and end of beneficial taxation for corporations is also going to come up as it relates to things like this, offshoring profits, and as it relates to giving companies exorbitant tax breaks to build facilities in states that never generate the benefits that they're promised when they get the tax benefits initially, right? Like, and now just going off on a tangent, but like Foxconn told Minnesota, I believe it was, that they were going to provide tens of thousands of tech jobs by building a facility there, and were given a bunch of tax breaks by the states. It ended up only making like a couple of hundred jobs, right? Like stuff like that. And so when I see stories like this Coca-Cola losing the tax case, I think it's just worth putting a pin in it and remembering it, because I think it's part of a much larger trend that's just starting.
That's how turnings work out, right?
That's it.
I like it. Mr. Hodge, have yourself a great Thanksgiving. I want to wish everybody a great week, a safe week. I hope everyone's surrounded by loved ones and people they like and love and care about. And I hope everybody has a good time. You want to say bye to everybody, Nick?
That's it. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Enjoy it, everybody. This was episode 95 of Bizarro World. Stay safe, be kind.
See ya.